Wow, I am impressed. To say that I went into the Terminator anime with extremely low expectations would definitely be an understatement. Not only has the Terminator franchise let me down continuously time and time again, but I also was kind of fearing that Netflix was going to do its traditional heavy CGI animation and just have this kind of style of anime that does not work for me whatsoever. Although there is a little bit of CGI in this show, it is mostly 2D animation that looks phenomenal, and I was incredibly impressed with how much I actually enjoyed this series. So, Terminator Zero is the name of it. Dropped today, August 29th, which is Judgment Day, by the way.
It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th.
And it is an 8-episode anime series that tells an original story within the Terminator universe. And I'm sitting there watching the first 5 minutes of the first episode. And at this point, I had not watched any of the trailers. I didn't know who was behind creating the show. And like I said, I was very nervous that this was going to be another continuous letdown of the Terminator franchise. But as I'm watching that first 5 minutes, I started thinking, wait a second, is this about to be awesome? And then it just kept getting more and more awesome as it went along. And I don't think it was just my low expectations of what this show could be, or the fact that I was so down on the Terminator franchise in general that made me like it. As I'm watching through the series, as I'm getting through all the episodes, I was actually very engaged in the story that it was telling. I was being drawn in by these characters, particularly the main scientist character, Malcolm Lee, who I think is a phenomenal addition to the Terminator franchise, as well as many of the twists and turns that the series gives you, along with the way that it conveys its information. I think every episode kind of leads you down one direction and then maybe shifts you just slightly to the side where you think you kind of know where it's going, and then it just slightly changes in these little variations every episode, alongside great animation, great action sequences, and compelling characters that you actually give a shit about. It made this stand out to me in a way that I truly was not expecting whatsoever. But as I said, this is an original story within the Terminator universe, and truth be told, I don't even know if this series is meant to actually take place within the same continuity of what we know of Terminator. And when it comes to continuity in Terminator, I mean, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure at this point, so who knows. But what I'm basically trying to say is that there's no mention of the movie characters in this series. I'm going to try not to spoil it for you guys, but just as a general overview, I'm just going to talk about a few things. But we don't get John Connor, we don't get Sarah Connor, we don't get Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, we don't get any of that stuff. And in fact, this show, the series takes place in Japan during the day of Judgment Day, during August 29th, 1997. So the show actually takes place on Judgment Day in a different part of the world. So in that respect, it makes sense that we wouldn't see the movie characters that we know because they're living in America at the time, along with where Skynet is and everything. So, you know, that's perfectly fine. But because there is no mention of them, and because there are variations of time travel that are explained within this series, it could go either way. And I don't really know what the intent of the creators were saying, if this was meant to be its own timeline. Because obviously it talks about Skynet and it talks about Judgment Day, you know, August 29, 1997, which was the Judgment Day of Terminator 2. So that makes me believe, yes, it does take place in at least the first two Terminators timeline. But at the same time, there's enough differences and enough nuance, and we don't really get involved with that side of the story, that it could also, you know, theoretically take place within its own continuity. None of that really matters for the story being told. I just think it's interesting to talk about. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think this is within the original Terminator timeline, or do you think this is completely within its own continuity, especially with the way that they explain time travel in the anime? But within the story that we get here, it does take place in Japan during this time, and there is a main scientist character that we get named Malcolm Lee, who has developed an AI system outside of what Skynet was, that is extremely advanced and potentially to the point where it could rival Skynet, which is something that Skynet themselves definitely does not want existing. And so we do get the standard tropes of what you would expect from a Terminator franchise. We get a Terminator, you know, obviously you do get a Terminator that gets sent back in time. to this day, and we also get a resistance fighter, and she is also sent back in time to this day. So you get the classic time travel thing, and you get the one Terminator, and you get the one human character that, you know, we've seen time and time again since the beginning of the franchise. But I also think the series does enough different things that it doesn't just fall into the same old Terminator tropes, alongside with many of its twists and turns and the focus that it has on a little bit more of the philosophical side of, you know, what it would mean for machines or for AI to take over the world. What does it mean for humanity? And kind of like painting it in many shades of gray, which I think is also really interesting because is there, you know, when you look at the idea of AI becoming so sentient and being able to think for itself or being able to have free will, which, by the way, I don't really think we're too far off from having a judgment day of our own, because if you look at the advancement of AI in our own world within just the past year, imagine that amplified in 10 years. You know, I think Terminator was right. It just had the date wrong. You know, it was probably about 50 years too early. I think Judgment Day will probably actually come if we continuously advance and evolve this AI and allow it to become sentient and take over. But anyways, that's besides the point. Terminator is a documentary. That's all I'm saying. But we have this scientist who is struggling with this idea of allowing this AI to have free reign that he's created. That's sort of, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but like, it's sort of, you know, it's something that he communicates with. It's something that he can have conversations with. It's something that he knows very well, but there's a limitation on it. And taking away that limitation could be just as dangerous as Skynet itself. So this is a complete separate entity of Skynet, but Skynet is still planning to start the Judgment Day itself no matter what. It's just this other AI that has suddenly kind of come up that they weren't expecting or that they weren't planning on is something that Skynet feels like they need to take control of as well. Now, on the flip side of that, the scientist character also deals with a tragic backstory, of course, and one that I was not expecting. There was a couple twists that I did call that I figured out, but his in particular, I did not. So I thought that was a really good one. I like the way that they did it, and I like the way that you don't really discover everything about him until probably episode 6 or 7. Like, it takes a while before you really get a full good understanding of who the scientist is and why he's doing what he's doing. So I like that aspect of it. He also has his family members, and there are 3 child characters, but like, they're completely tolerable and also really great characters in their own right. A lot of times, you know, child characters can be overbearing or annoying, or they're just constantly getting in trouble and needing to be saved. These characters work a lot better. They're kind of like, well, John Connor, I mean, in Terminator 2 was a child character that I enjoyed. And these kids aren't as, you know, rebellious or, you know, angsty as John Connor, but they work very well as they're 3 siblings. They're 2 brothers and a sister, and they work very, very well together, and they kind of go off doing their own thing while continuously getting involved and getting attacked by the Terminator that has come back in time. And I enjoyed their story very much, along with their caretaker, who's, of course, name I can't remember. Hang on. Yes, they have a caretaker named Misaki who is kind of standing in for the role of their mother, who is no longer with them. And this character is great. This character is great. I don't want to explain too much about her, but I really liked her involvement in the story. And again, almost every character, like no matter who it is, whether it's the scientist or the kids or her or even the Terminator, they all have a little bit more to them than you would be expecting originally. And I like how it unravels, particularly with her character. She, besides the scientist, might have been my favorite. And there's a couple aspects that makes Terminator a great franchise, in my opinion. One is the more philosophical side to it, where you wonder about the concept of fate. If fate is something that you can change over time, if it's something, you know, fate is something you make for yourself, you know, if it's possible to do something a little bit different. And if you do, what does that mean for what came before, right? How does that change the future? How does it change your perception of what happened in the past and in the present? And what I like about this show also is there are a lot of scenes with the scientist and the AI that he created that are talking about these kind of like philosophical ideas. And like I said, questioning humanity's purpose in the world, and if they've caused more harm than they have good. And if you look at, again, the idea of an AI taking over the world, well, get out of the idea of just good and evil. It's not as though the machines take over because they are evil. It's like the machines take over because they view humanity as a threat to them, number one, but also as a threat to the planet itself. Like, what have human beings contributed to the world that's made the world a better place? Not the world for humans, but the physical world. And there's very, very little in the grand scheme of things, And it talks about humanity's, search for meaning, and how we attribute meaning to things, or how we try to understand things through the creation of meaning. And is that something unique to humanity, or is that something that AI would eventually be able to discover for themselves too? And it talks about a lot of these really creative ideas that I enjoyed, and I could sit through and watch these kind of conversations unfold and be really engaged by them, which I was throughout the show. But on the flip side of that, the other thing that makes Terminator great is the horror aspect of it. And this show does not shy away from the blood, the violence, and the terror of what a Terminator could do, of how it could just grab your hand and just crush it immediately, or how it could just plow through an entire police force with almost no difficulty whatsoever. And even beyond that, there are these like robotic helpers, like they're not Terminators, they're just sort of like maintenance, bots, and like they're just sort of like helping humanity. But once all of them get switched on, I think it's really, really scary how it could not only just kill a human quickly and easily with its strength and efficiency, but also the idea that it could just walk by a dead human being and just there's just no reaction whatsoever, because they're just unthinking, unthinking as in terms of like emotion. It's like there's no emotion, you can't reason with it. It has a prime directive, and it's just following out that directive, and just gives no regard to the human life that's around it, which is a terrifying concept, which is one of the scariest things about the Terminator, is that it's not just that it's a physical force that is way stronger than a human being, doesn't have to rely on energy or stamina. It doesn't have to sleep. You're not going to confuse it, all of that kind of stuff. But on top of that, it's just that pure deadpan, emotionless, thoughtless, just blank slate that will just do what it needs to do and move on to the next thing. There's no negotiating whatsoever. And I think that this show definitely capitalizes on the things that make the Terminator scary, or that make the concept of AI taking over the world or combating human beings, the aspect that actually makes it terrifying. The show does a really good job at capitalizing on. There are definitely moments that you don't expect, characters are going to get brutalized as badly as they do. And oftentimes it comes out of nowhere. And you get that in the first 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes basically shows you what you could be in store for, because it takes place in the future. And it shows a Terminator going through and mowing down a bunch of resistance fighters. And, it gives you kind of all the violence and all the gore and all the horror that you could want out of the Terminator. But like I said, there is also a lot of heart and emotion and philosophical ideas that come about through the story. And if you can blend those two things together, those are my favorite kind of stories most of the time, because I am a bit of a gore hound, and I love to see like the chaos and the action sequences and the violence and stuff. Like, give me all of that, but then also give me deep conversations about humanity and our place in the world, and what it means to find meaning, and what it means to fall in love, or be able to have free will. And you put all that together in a story, that's the best of both worlds, in my opinion, because you are getting the catharsis of the brutality that you want through, fiction, but then you're also getting, ideas and messages and inspiration through it as well. And I think because this show is dealing with all new characters, you kind of have free reign to play with all of these things in whatever way that they want to. I love Sarah Connor, I love John Connor, and I love me some motherfucking Arnold Schwarzenegger. It feels just like coming. But I feel like that aspect of Terminator has been done to death in so many different ways, and it's been ruined in many ways. You know, it's like you had the first two, and they were obviously both masterpieces. I don't hate Terminator 3. I think it's unnecessary. You know, I don't think it's a movie that needed to be made, but I like the idea that Judgment Day is only postponed because eventually human beings are going to create something anyway. So I like the idea that it's inevitable. Maybe it's a little bit nihilistic. I don't know, but I kind of like that idea. And I think that Terminator 3 has some good action sequences in it, particularly the car chase. Terminator Salvation. Look, I hate the fact, like everyone else, that the future war, they didn't even attempt to make it look how the future war looked in the James Cameron movies. But again, I think Terminator Salvation is an enjoyable movie in and of itself. Like, again, I think it has good action. Christian Bale's good in it. I don't know. It's fine. After that, they significantly go downhill for me. Terminator Genesis, I thought was abysmally bad. And I was like, there's no way they're ever going to make a Terminator movie worse than that. And then they made Terminator Dark Fate, and I was proven wrong. So that's why I was scared for the anime. Oh, also the TV show, Sarah Connor Chronicles, pretty good. Pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. But all of those stories deal with the same essential characters, right? You're dealing with John, you're dealing with Sarah, you're dealing with Terminator, or Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, Kyle Reese to a degree. So it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air to, number one, have a Terminator series that's actually really enjoyable and engaging, but also to take a break from those characters and deal with a different part of the world, a different idea incorporated with a new AI system separate from Skynet, you know, sort of like a rival AI system, which I thought was a really neat idea to throw in here. And it just felt like this was what Terminator needed. To me, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how other people are going to feel about it. It's a little bit too early. I haven't seen any other reviews. And like I said, I was ignoring everything about it until I watched it. I didn't even watch the trailers. You know, I saw the posters. I knew it was coming out, but I didn't know anything about it. So for me, I was pleasantly surprised with what I got. I don't know how the general consensus is going to feel, but this worked for me. I like the characters. I like the story. I love the twists and turns. I love the ideas that it presents. I love the new elements that were involved. And I think the animation was good. The action sequences were good. I could follow the choreography, which is really nice. It wasn't just like flashing images at the screen like a lot of modern anime. I could actually see the choreography, which was good. I thought it was a creative story. Timothy Olyphant plays the voice of the Terminator, by the way. Didn't realize that until like halfway through. He doesn't have a lot of lines, but you can tell it's him after a while. Yeah, I guess my opinion is that it was good. I liked it a lot. Anyways, guys, if you saw Terminator Zero, I keep just calling it the Terminator anime. It has an official name, Terminator Zero. If you have seen this, let me know what you thought about it down below. It premiered today. It's 8 episodes long. I think it's definitely worth your time, especially if you're a Terminator fan and you've been, like me, if you felt a little burned by the last couple movies. This might be what you need at this point in time. And also, when you watch it, think about the advancement of AI in our real modern world and how scary this is going to be in the future, because I'm not joking, man. I really do think that AI is going to become sentient to the point where it's going to view humanity as obsolete at some point and take over everything. And even if it doesn't, even if we're not thrown into an apocalypse, you know, I feel like it's going to make most humans obsolete with all of the different things that it can do and take away creative avenues and aspects for people to get into if AI can just create movies and TV shows and art and books and novels and everything artistic and creative that comes from a human soul, you know. But then again, you know, you play with the ideas like this does, or like Alien or Blade Runner does, where you play with the ideas of, well, if AI advances so far, then at what point are they just as human? You know, if they do have this openness to learn and they have free will, and then they can create based upon, you know, an emotion. I don't know. Can AI have free will? I don't know. It's talked about a little bit in this anime. Anyways, I digress. So let me know what you think about this series down below, guys. If you have seen it, if you're watching it right now, let me know what you think. Leave all your thoughts, theories, comments, and opinions down below. If you'd enjoyed this video, guys, please give it a thumbs up and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. I'd appreciate it if you did so. And if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have Patreon channel memberships and all the various social media links where you can follow me down below. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.